Welcome to Untold Stories. I'm Nikki, and today we're peeling back the curtain on one of Hollywood's most acclaimed masterpieces. You know the story, the black and white film, The Girl in the Red Coat, the businessman who saved over 1,000 lives. Schindler's List swept the Academy Awards and shaped how the world sees the Holocaust. But here's what might shock you: the Hollywood version you know. It's not the whole truth. Today, we're going deep into the shadows of history to uncover what really happened. Because the real Oskar Schindler, he's far more complex, more human, and in many ways more extraordinary than the silver screen hero you think you know. Let's start with the man himself. Picture this: 1939, occupied Poland. A German businessman arrives in Krakow, Nazi party pin gleaming on his lapel. His name? Oskar Schindler. His mission? To get rich off the war. This wasn't a man driven by altruism or moral conviction. This was pure opportunism. Cheap Jewish labor meant bigger profits. Simple math. But then something changed, something that would transform this profit-driven Nazi into one of history's most unlikely heroes. It wasn't a moment of divine inspiration like Hollywood would have you believe. It was gradual, messy, human. Schindler witnessed the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto. He saw the mass killings, and slowly, painfully, his conscience awakened. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. That famous list, the one that saved over 1,000 lives, Schindler didn't write it. Not alone, anyway. The real architects of salvation were his Jewish associates, men like Itzhak Stern and Matek Pemper. They compiled those 1,200 names under Schindler's direction, yes, but their fingerprints are all over every life saved. Hollywood loves a single hero. It's cleaner, more dramatic. But the truth is messier and more beautiful. It was a collaboration born of desperation and hope. Schindler provided the protection and resources. His Jewish associates provided the intelligence and the name. Together, they created a lifeline to survival. But what happened after the credits rolled? What happened when the war ended and the camera stopped rolling? Here's where the real story gets heartbreaking. Oskar Schindler, the man who saved 1,200 lives, died poor and largely forgotten. He and his wife Emilie fled to Argentina with help from some of the survivors. Later, he returned to Germany, financially ruined. The people he saved? They never forgot. They sent him money, they supported him, and when he died in 1974, he was buried in Jerusalem, honored by those whose lives he had touched. But to the world, he was nobody, just another name in history's footnotes until Spielberg's cameras found him decades later. Now let's talk about what Hollywood got wrong, or rather, what it chose to dramatize for maximum impact. Remember that haunting image of the little girl in the red coat? The one spot of color in that sea of black and white horror? It never happened, not as shown. It's symbolic, powerful, but not real. Spielberg used that image to represent innocence in the midst of unspeakable evil. God, does it work? But it's cinema, not history. The real horror needed no red coat to make it visible, and that scene where Schindler's female workers are mistakenly sent to Auschwitz. It did happen. But the movie compressed weeks of negotiations, bribes, and desperate maneuvering into one tense sequence. The reality was far more complicated, far more terrifying, and took much longer to resolve. Then there's that final scene. Schindler breaking down, lamenting that he could have saved more, crying over his car, his Nazi pin, saying he could have saved more lives. Survivors confirmed he did feel guilt. At that specific moment, that dramatic breakdown, pure Hollywood. So here's the question that matters. Does it matter that Hollywood took liberties? Does it matter that the timeline was compressed, that characters were merged, that symbolic moments were created? I believe it does. Not because the film is wrong, but because understanding the full truth makes the story even more powerful. The real Oskar Schindler wasn't a saint who experienced a sudden conversion. He was a flawed human being who gradually chose humanity over profit. His transformation wasn't cinematic. It was messy, slow, and real. And that makes it infinitely more inspiring than any Hollywood hero. The real story shows us that ordinary people, flawed people, can choose to do extraordinary things. It wasn't just Schindler's List. It was their list, a collaboration born of desperation and hope, created by people who refused to let evil have the final word. Spielberg's film introduced millions to the Holocaust's horrors. It preserved survivor testimony, it won 7 Academy Awards, and changed how we remember this dark chapter of history. But the real story reminds us that heroes aren't born, they're made through choices. Small choices that add up to something extraordinary. So the next time you watch Schindler's List, remember this: the man who saved 1,200 lives wasn't a Hollywood hero. He was something far more powerful. He was human, flawed, complicated, and ultimately courageous. And in a world that seems increasingly divided, maybe that's exactly the kind of hero we need to remember. I'm Nikki, and this has been Untold Stories, because sometimes the truth is even more extraordinary than the legend.